Okay, for you, Stephanie. All right, so my question is, so I know you're a parent coach. I did read your bio. I read all of your bios, by the way. And for you, Stephanie, what are some of the most common challenges you recognize that are faced by parents?
That's a good question. Some of the most common dilemmas that parents face, I would say, is struggling with discipline and like the effective ways to discipline their child. Because, sometimes our people come from a place where discipline is about being militant and spankings and things like that, when actually discipline is about creating structure and boundaries. And so there's this gentle parenting thing that's going on right now, and it often gets confused with passive parenting, but gentle parenting is pretty much just conscious and intentional parenting. And so, along with discipline, I think a lot of families struggle with effective communication. I know what I want my child to do, I know how they should do it and when they should do it, but when I'm talking to them about it, it's not working, right? So having the emotional intelligence to know your child, how your child receives love, how your child communicates, those are the most effective ways to communicate effectively with your child. And so I think that's one of the things that parents need to really work on, the social emotional piece of effective communication.
Yeah, very nice. And I guess also too, if you have multiple children, it's also being able to identify the difference between those children, right?
Yeah, because you have to show up as a different parent for each child.
Yep.
And you're going on your own journey as a person. So it's a lot that happens.
Yeah, that's a fact. My mother had 3 children, and definitely she had to treat us differently when it came to reprimanding.
Yeah, because you go to your default. You do what you know, right? Yeah, so if communication is a barrier, it's easy to go, well, my mom did this with me, so I'm gonna do it now. I guess it worked, I'm fine, right? And so that's where sometimes we do get stuck, because all we know is a certain way. And when we don't have that ability to communicate, whether it's like literally a barrier in language, you will come across those difficult times. But you have to give yourself grace and also give your child grace, right? And know that, okay, we're on a journey together. How can we get through this as a family rather than like as enemies? It's me against you, right? So the thing about co-parenting, most often people view co-parenting as 2 parents that are no longer in a relationship, whether it worked or didn't work, and now we have to parent from different households. But co-parenting can happen in a marriage, in the same household as well. It's 2 people working together to parent their children. So whether you're separated from the person or you're together, you have to set the values and the core principles for the family, period, right? And so if both parties understand, hey, the end goal is for our child to get good grades and become a productive citizen, these are the things that I'm going to do in my household. I hope that you can respect that. These are the things that you're going to do in your household, and have those effective communication conversations, right? Everything starts with a conversation. But if you're not in a place to have those conversations, if there's tension there, then the only thing you're in control of is yourself, right? So I have personal experience with having to co-parent separate with my son's father, and in the beginning it was tumultuous, in and out of court and all of that stuff, until, back to my speech earlier, I made a choice. It's not beneficial for me or for my son for me to go back and forth. He's not the parent I expected him to be, but he's a really good person and a really great father. So I had to let go of my expectations and worry about myself. I knew that I had a child with somebody at the time I cared about, and I know he's not going to put my child in any physical danger. So I have to let go and trust that my son is covered regardless. And so the principles that I set and the values I set within my son, I have to know and trust that wherever he goes, whether it's his father, when it's time to go to college, in school, he's going to have the foundation that I set. And that is going to dictate, the choices that he makes. I can't spend my time worrying about the co-parent and what to do. You just focus on yourself and making sure you instill those values into your child.
Yeah, I like that one. Yep, I had a very similar experience, and I had to make the decision to focus on myself. All right, so that was the last question for Stephanie. Okay, Laquana, here's my question for you. I also read your bio. And what I did like about your bio, and I recognize that you did start the real estate charm school, as you mentioned earlier today. So at what point did you realize that there was value in starting that school?
Okay, so being that I've worked at about 3 different brokerages in New York City, I started seeing that as you're coming in, you're getting promised all these things from the managing broker. We're gonna give you training, we're gonna help you get your first listing, we're gonna guide you through the process. And at the minute I used to sign on, there would be no training. They would not guide me. And being black and brown in a community where you're trying to sell luxury real estate, it's not as common. So I said, let me develop something. I prayed, I said, God, give me the idea and I'll make the money later. Well, I started, let me put together a training that's a boiler point training for most agents in New York City and New Jersey that's gonna help them when they first start out, from getting licensed to how to keep the client, close the client, and still follow up to get referrals from this client and add value. So I've seen that just from being in the industry for 10 years, and I didn't see people like me going higher in these different, markets and things like that.
Yeah, very nice. And it reminded me of something similar like with the tech industry. Like a lot of times people will go, let's say for a Scrum Master, which I know is not a familiar term, but it's basically a project manager in the tech field. But you'll get the certification, and then after that, it's like, what do I do next? You don't necessarily have the tools or the skills or the experience yet to really apply to grow. So there are people who have started boot camps to help you in that journey. So that's why that stood out to me. So I can see the value in that.
What I started doing was getting up. I started 30 minutes earlier than I did an hour earlier. I had to fall back in love with myself. I was giving everybody all of me. My husband, my kids, I was serving. My clients, I was serving. I was not serving myself. So I would get up between 30 minutes to an hour earlier, whatever's possible, and I would time block. The kids are gonna take a nap at some time, right? I would time block, and sometimes you need to take a nap too, so that's okay. But I would time block and say, okay, from 12 to 1, I'm gonna prospect, I'm gonna follow up my clients, I'm gonna do all my emails, I'm gonna do everything. Your children need you, 100%. You can't be on your phone and trying to do, different things with them. So I started falling back in love with me. When my husband got off work and came home, leave the house. I left the house. If you try to go to another room and get things done, you're still playing mommy. You're still being pulled, you still hear your kids, and you know what to do best. They know what to do, it's just gonna look different. So I started waking up earlier, time blocking, and leaving the house to get things done, or going to a place where I could focus. And falling back in love with yourself is key. They need you to be fully there.
Yep. Yeah. And to add to that, I totally agree 100%. And I think also to add to that is developing a schedule, right? So if you're kind of just doing things aimlessly, it'll be more difficult to maintain, especially if you have a lot going on. Prioritizing. And I say prioritizing based on value. Working in project management, we definitely work on value. So prioritize what you need to do based on value. The value will change depending on where you are. So take that into consideration. And so very good question. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the things I decided to do, I did research. So first I narrowed down. I started off with trying to figure out which industry was going to provide me job security and stability, right? And which one was going to provide me with the largest income right away because I needed the money right away. Right? So I knew that technology, perhaps finance, maybe even the health field. So I started off with technology, and then what I did was I tried to figure out how to get into technology. I did research. There was a number of things that I looked at, and I realized that perhaps coding would be the best option for me. So that's when I signed up for the coding school. The thing is that I was kind of introduced to Scrum, and this is why it's important to meet people, which is why Kurt made sure that you guys networked, right? It was because I met someone, this is why I was able to be introduced to all of these things. I wasn't even aware of Scrum Master, but I took the certification, fell in love with it, but I still needed to get into the industry. So I continued to do research, YouTube. It helped me narrow it down based on the criteria that was important to me. So when I did that, there were certain things that I needed to do, like get certifications. I did research to determine what are the next steps, which required to get into the industry, and I continue with there. So like you're starting off with PMP. First determine, and I'm assuming you already have determined this is what you want to do. Project management for sure?
Well, yes, I already have experience with the construction part of it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the way I want to.
Right. So if you're considering Scrum, just compare the two. They're extremely close, but they do have their differences, and that's what made me to choose the Scrum route. So just do a comparison, you'll make a decision from there. But you cannot go wrong with the PMP. Either way, it'll be something that's going to provide value for either route. Right? And then you can also follow me on Instagram, and then also I'll provide any free consultation for, give you some advice. I love giving advice. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions about real estate or entrepreneurship or handling a busy schedule like Wakwana has with her family and business and things of that nature? Okay. All right. All right, so the next one. Kirk Boston. You had a whole lot to talk about today. All right. So my question for you is, at what point in your journey did you identify the link between mental health and performance, or mental health and success?
So I realized that while I was meeting people that society deemed was successful, right? And when I saw them, I saw there was no difference between who they are and who I am. So I was like, oh shit, maybe I got this idea of what success looks like is wrong. And I realized looking at our communities that we are super talented. We are some of the most talented, some of the most smartest people. Like Haitian people are some of the most resilient people I know.
You know what?
Sorry,
We're not all Haitian here, you know that.
I feel bad for you. right? But just generally speaking, Caribbean people. Are you Caribbean?
Yes.
My grandfather is.
So you are too?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right? But anyways, just generally speaking, black, colored folks in general, right? We are some of the most resilient people. We're some of the most talented people. But what's getting in our way is our emotional state. Because people don't do what they know, they do what they feel. Emotions drives behaviors. And when I figured that out, that's when my whole life changed. It was like, oh shit, I was always a smart kid, but I didn't have the healthy coping mechanisms to deal with my anger. My anger made me do whoop whoop and third. The next thing you know, I went to 4 high schools in 4 years. You know what I'm saying? It was like, oh, that was the issue. I just didn't have that link right there on what to do when I feel upset, what to do when I feel anxious, what to do when I feel a little bit down. And when I started realizing that changed the game. And then when I realized even more, none of our school systems teach this. That's when I was like, oh, they're monetizing off of our ignorance because they make money in our prison system.
That's right.
Right? They make money medicating us. Right? Some black people are the most medicated. Look at the ADHD. They try to shove a couple of that down my throat. Like, pause. Like, they tried to give me the ADHD medication. You know what I'm saying? Like, they try to medicate me with depression. They tried that. I was like, wait a second. They're monetizing off of my emotional state versus giving me the true tools to allow me to excel and be great.
Right. Yeah, very true. I think it's super important that you definitely, and I mentioned the self-inventory. Take self-inventory, get to know yourself and see why you're responding certain ways and doesn't really make sense, right? Are you benefiting from those responses? So I totally agree that the mental state means a whole lot. Also too, what I've noticed, back to what you said, is that a lot of times, I feel like far too often, black people, we have this I don't give a attitude. And it's like, I don't care what anybody says. I'm gonna do this, because I don't care. Like, it makes you feel like you're more, I don't know. It seems like it gives the person power. But in our reality, when you're easily provoked and influenced by somebody, you're actually displaying a low level of power over yourself. And we think, oftentimes, that it's making us appear to be stronger, but really is just displaying weakness, right? So I think that was super on point. And does anyone else have a question? You raising your hand? Okay, yeah.
Kurt, how you doing, Kurt? I have a question. If you can give a message, right, now that you're older, more mature, to your younger self, right, what would it be?
A lot. If I was like if I could go back and tell like the 15-year-old version of myself, I would say work on your credit. Invest in Microsoft or something. Honestly, I would probably say I would try to teach myself the philosophy, you can't behave higher than what you think. You can't behave higher than what you think, right? And I didn't realize how like our thinking patterns are linked to our behaviors, which are linked to the outcomes we're getting. So I would want to expose myself to new set of thoughts. And the exposure of new set of thoughts means I have to expose myself to new set of people, means I have to read new books, means I have to try new things, means I have to venture out, and that exposure or that diversity of thinking will change my habits. If I change my habits, then I would change my outcome. You get what I'm saying? Like, I feel like it's dope, but it's kind of sad. Like, if you look at any black neighborhood, what do you think their favorite music is?
Trap.
What do you think their favorite sports are? Basketball and football. You get what I'm saying? It's like we're programmed to do this. Like, mind you, I grew up doing the same thing. I'm not saying I would go back and play tennis, but maybe I would have swing or play golf or something like that. You get what I'm saying? Just trying new things to get new thoughts, to get new results. I would definitely tell myself that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that anymore. I have another question.
I just wanted to know, did you go to therapy as far as like, you know, to understand your emotions? Like, how did you become so knowledgeable about like, you know, that this is affecting you as an individual?
My story is not everyone else's story, so I always want to be mindful of that. I want to be mindful of that. I saw a therapist early on, and I told the therapist my story, and they looked at me and said, "Oh my gosh," and dropped the pen. And that's when I walked out the room and I was like, oh, like they were so in shock with everything. I was so like, oh my gosh. I was like, what do you mean, oh my gosh? Then
Where do we go from here?
Like, where do we go, right? And then once that happened, then I realized that less than 5% of therapists are therapists of color. They don't come from similar backgrounds I came from, so they don't have a set of experience. So when you just read someone like me versus experience someone like me, it's going to be a little bit different. So that's when I took on the responsibility of doing it myself. And then I fell in love with not with therapy, but coaching, right? Sometimes there's a little bit of a difference. So sometimes people need both, sometimes people need one versus the other. I like to focus on the future, right? Who I am today and where I want to grow into being. Like, that's my idea, not really always pinpointing one or two moments in the past. So from my experience, my own, not everyone else's, sometimes therapy opens up a door that I couldn't close in 45 minutes. So I left there in a very negative emotional state, and I was just feeling it for a week or two. I was like, yo, what's going on? Because I didn't have the tools outside of therapy, and they weren't teaching me the tools outside of therapy to really help my emotional state. So that's when I fell in love and said, you know what, I'm gonna do this stuff my own.
Yeah, and also I kind of feel like as long as you are always open to wanting to improve, I mean, open, your mind is open to it. That's something that you're expecting to do, you desire it. It kind of also just happens. But if you're in a pessimistic state and you're not open to change, you're not desiring change, you're not desiring the ability to flourish and become the better version of yourself, I mean a constant state of wanting to be better, a better friend, a better lover, a better human being. I mean, literally obsessing over it, you know? When it happens, and I don't mean I'm obsessing over it in an unhealthy way, but as long as you keep that open on a consistent basis, things just start to happen because you start to recognize things, you start to pay attention, you start to have a retrospect of yourself, and then you'll recognize as time goes by, like, wow, I've evolved so much, I've changed so much because I was open to it. How'd you like that? Do we have any other questions? Okay, we have it.
It's not really a question, but it's a thank you, because I never thought about this happiness, the pursuit of happiness being an obstacle to happiness. So I'm going to bring it to my daughter. I'm going to tell her, explain, because I understand. I'm thinking of it, and I understand what you said, and I thank you.
Thank you. The last thing I'll say about this pursuit of happiness, I just realized that for some people, what I used to do to be happy was not it was self-destructive.
Yep.
For some of us, my happiness was being in a miserable state, because that's when you come from traumatic backgrounds, right? My happiness was ugly as hell. And for some people I know, they're happy beating people up. They are happy doing illegal activities. They are happy selling drugs. They're legit happy to rob someone. There's a level of excitement they get of doing this like negative behaviors. And so that's when I realized, like, wait a second. What you're doing to be happy is not necessarily conducive or is aligned to what's going to allow you to thrive. Happiness and success aren't the same thing. So that's what kind of put me on this journey.
Very well said. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
They are happy to do toxic things. It's crazy. Okay. Yeah. So I think that completes the Q&A. Yeah.
So,
All right. Well, I want to thank you
Appreciate y'all.
so much. Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Laquana. And thank you, Stephanie. You guys are amazing.